I'm going to go through 5 big mistakes that could be ruining your hand sharpening. Just before I do, and stay around to the end because the last one is one of the most important, especially if you want a super sharp edge to your pocket knife. Just before I get into that, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the channel Outdoors 55. I've learned so much from watching that guy, so I certainly recommend you look at that. I'm still learning all the time with my sharpening. With every knife I sharpen and with every technique I'm practicing, I think my technique is getting better. Also, with some of the great comments that people leave, the constructive comments, I do read them all. I try and reply to all comments as well. So if you think I'm doing something wrong, let me know. If you've got questions, let me know, and I'll do what I can to help. I'm not pretending to be an expert. I'm still learning. Let's go through the 5 big mistakes that you might be making when hand sharpening, which are affecting how well you can sharpen. Mistake number 1, going to a high grit stone too soon. Now the problem with this is that the higher the grit, the more passes you need. So it's always better to start on a lower grit stone. So just getting your technique. In this case, I've got my angle matching the bevel, and I'm trying to keep that angle nice and steady when I'm doing that. But the main thing is, do the work on the lower grit first before you go up to the higher grit, because you're going to need maybe 10 times as many passes on the higher grit than you do on the lower grit, and having to maintain the angle for all of that is hard. So you want to minimize the work and minimize the number of strokes that you have to do. If you haven't already, why not subscribe? It really helps my channel, and you'll see more of my videos when they come out in the future. Mistake number 2 is not putting enough pressure on or getting the pressure right. And this takes a lot of practice. I think I've often been too tentative in sharpening, so I've been sharpening and not putting enough pressure on. You don't need to put it really hard, otherwise you'll gouge out the stone, but just make sure you've got enough pressure and you can hear the stone doing its work. If it's too light, you won't hear it much at all. So just a little bit of pressure and nice and even across the whole of the blade. So getting the pressure right is really important. Don't be too scared to put a little bit of pressure on, but don't press too hard. You should be letting the stone do the work. Mistake number 3 is missing some of the edge, and especially the tip. Now, if you're not used to it, one option could be to use a marker pen. And I'm just going to put it on one side here. But if you put a marker pen on the edge and you cover all of that secondary bevel, then when you do your sharpening, and it doesn't matter which stone it's on, you can see which bit of the blade you're keeping in contact with the stone. So you see I'm struggling a bit with here, so you see, and then to make sure I don't miss the tip, and I can see really clearly which bits I've got. Especially with these curved blades, it can be difficult to maintain that even pressure across all of the blades. So if you look at that, you can see I can work out exactly which bit is hard to do. And unfortunately with this particular knife, it doesn't have a sharpening choil, so it's quite difficult to get to that part. You try just doing some towards me here. I might need to use a different stone for that. Anyway, so missing some of the blade and using a marker pen with practice, that's really key. The fourth mistake is an inconsistent angle. Now, what you can do is to use one of these angle guides. Some of them have magnets, so they help to stick, and this has the key angles on here. So for instance, typically for a Victorinox, I'll be going for 20 degrees. For this, it's more like 17. So I can put it on here, and then all I need to do is to hold it at that angle to keep it consistent. The only other alternative is to go to a fixed angle guided sharpener, or maybe to use one of the rolling sharpeners. From my experience, the rolling sharpeners are more fiddly to use the smaller the blade you go to, but they're alternatives. So using one of these guides can be a big help. And then the last tip, the last mistake, is missing the strop. So make sure that once you've sharpened and you've got it as sharp as you think it can, make sure that you use a strop. And in this case, with the strop, and I've got a separate video on this which I'll put in the description below. In this case, I'm just stropping by pulling away from the edge, not having the edge going first, keeping it nice and light and letting the strop do the work. And then as a final, just using the rough leather itself just to trim off any burrs. And the stropping compound that I like is Smurf poo. This works really well, especially for the less hard steels. It works really well on the inox for Victorinox, and for my Spyderco, which is CTS BD1, so it's not a super steel or anything. So it works really well on that. And I'm not saying that this is the sharpest, but you get a consistent edge with no hold up, no nicks, and you should find that that's plenty for what you need. So just to remember, avoid these 5 mistakes. Don't go to a high grit too soon. Make sure that you get the pressure right, not too light, but also not too hard. Let the stone do the work. Make sure that you get all of the edge of the knife, and you can use a marker pen if you want to check which bits you've missed. Make sure that you have a consistent angle, and that comes with practice and using a guide. And then last of all, make sure that you don't miss the strop. I hope you found this useful. Please leave me comments if there's anything that you think I've missed that's super important. If you think there's anything that I've done wrong, I'm always keen to learn more, and let me know if you thought this was useful. Why not check out this video or this playlist on sharpening, and I'll catch you in the next video.